Hi, this is Steph, retired paramedic, and I wanted to do a follow-up. The last video I put out was, I think the thumbnail was we need to change our medical system, something to that effect. And I wanted to follow up um, I want this primarily to be directed at people who are in healthcare and primarily, uh, I've already talked about all my medical merry-go-round stuff, but I want this to be directed more so to people who are pre-hospital, EMTs, paramedics, pre-hospital RNs, whatever. Uh, in previous videos, I've talked about all the nonsense I've been through, uh, but I want to sort of give a rundown of what Mike experienced over the years. And by the way, I did file a complaint with our state EMS office and also our regional EMS council. And I got the expected response from the state. It was in an email, not even an official letter, just an email. Yeah, we looked into this and, nothing to see here. Move along, which is exactly what I expected. But I'm just not the type of person that can go, oh, well, it was a really bad call and these people clearly didn't know what they were doing. But, I'm just going to let it go because I'm just not that type of person. And then I didn't hear anything from the local uh, EMS council. So I finally shot this guy an email and I'm like, what's up with my complaint? Because he had told me that when the state completed their investigation, and then he would look into it. And I got an email back, which kind of didn't make it sound like he was really going to look into anything. He's just like, oh, I'm really sorry. And, give me my condolences. And I shot back and said, I don't want your condolences. I don't want excuses. I just want to see stuff get better. And so, but nevertheless, I still say to people, if you don't stand up, if you don't complain, I don't have like a good saying to insert in there, but it's just been decades and decades of people being apathetic. And I don't know how many times I've heard from people, well, it is what it is, or, oh, well, what can you do? Look where it gets you. The United States, I mean, the boat is sinking. The boat is like this, the band is playing on the deck, and the dollar is crashing. I mean, it may go up and down, and I'm no stock market expert, believe me, but when this whole house of cards comes down and whoever's left to rebuild it, I would hope that people learn a lesson. Number one, we are all human, you know, and we are so divided on so many different issues. But I'm hoping at some point in the future, maybe the younger people, will take the bull by the horns and build a better system and actually, a piece of buzz on me, actually have health care that's actually providing some health or helping someone's health. I mean, I firmly believe there's a place for allopathic medicine. I mean, in I've said this before, in an emergency or in a trauma situation. I mean, you want someone that's going to be able to save you and maybe, patch you back together in surgery. What, I'm not saying like allopathic medicine just needs to go away. But my God, people, I mean, we need to do something different here. So anyway, Mike, for anyone who's new, which I doubt it, but if anyone is, I was with someone for almost 2 decades, and he was in heart failure for about the past decade, and he succumbed to that this past September, 2024, September 17th. So, um, going back to, I'm not sure exactly, it was somewhere around 20, somewhere between 2011, 12, somewhere in there. He had, it might have been earlier. I'm not sure on the dates. We moved a lot, so it's I try to think like where we were living and what the year was, but I'm not absolutely positive. But anyway, he had his first heart attack when he was like 48, I believe. Came home from work and he just crawled into bed, and I was like, I said he already had cardiomyopathy, which is an enlarging and thickening of the heart, okay, but he had not actually had a heart attack yet. And so he came home from work and crawled into bed, which he had never done ever. In fact, this was a man who never ever, at least the time I was with him, never ever called off of work. And he was a hard worker. He was a mechanic. He was very good at being a mechanic. But anyway, he came home and I'm like, what? I said, what's going on? You're so tired. I said, you've never done this. And he said, I don't know. I'm just really tired. I said, well, I said, do you have anything else? And he said, no. I said, your chest feels okay? Yeah, yeah, everything feels fine. He said, I'm just really tired. I want to take a nap. And I said, Mike, you could be having a heart attack. And we had a hospital like 3 blocks, maybe 4, up the road from our apartment at the time. I spent an hour trying to talk him into. I knew I'd never. I wouldn't call an ambulance because I knew at that point he was not going to go with them. And you can't just take people. You know, if they don't want to go or if they don't want treatment, you don't put your hands on them. At least when I was trained, and it's right in my paramedic book, you can be charged with assault, ag assault, and kidnapping if you like take someone out of their house. So anyway, I stood there for an hour arguing with him about just let me take you up to the hospital. They can do an EKG, check your blood, um, you know, look for the enzymes which are indicative of a heart attack, and if everything's good, you can come home. No, 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 no. I went out and we went round and round and round. And I think he got up later in the evening. I don't quite remember. But anyway, he got up the next morning and I was just, praying all night. Like he was just going to make it through the night. Nothing was going to happen. We get up in the morning and I said, how are you feeling? He's like, well, I still feel a little bit tired, but, not too bad. Still wasn't, no chest pain, nothing. So he goes to work. And I think he started work at 7, I believe. Around 10 o'clock, I get a phone call from, I don't know if it was from him or the manager at the shop. I don't remember, but somebody called me because all of a sudden he just got profusely diaphoretic and got real dizzy. And so, anyway, that was the first heart attack. I think he was 48, I want to say. I'm not positive. So, he was able to continue working. He was not disabled by that, thankfully. And then some years later, we were not living in PA, we were living in a different state. He had a massive heart attack. About one half of the right main coronary artery was occluded, and we don't even know for how long. Um, and even though he was having a massive heart attack, he was sitting in a chair looking about as much distressed as I look right now. And um, at one point, towards evening or afternoon, I forget, he looked at me and he said, I'm having a little, he would get like a little burning, but it was go up in his neck and jaw, and that was it. Nothing dramatic. Other than that, he looked fine. He never had trouble breathing. Um, he wouldn't get all sweaty. He would just be sitting in a chair going, yeah, I have some chest pain. So at one point, he looked at me and he said, I think I might be having another heart attack. So I called for EMS. They come. When they pull up, I yelled out my door. I said, can you please bring a pan? Because he had had projectile vomiting, which I'd never seen this man puke ever. And he never puked till the day he died. But I yelled at the door and I said, please bring a pan and not one of those little emesis basins. They don't hold anything. Just bring like a hospital bin. And I said, please bring some oxygen. They didn't. They brought themselves. Thankfully, they brought the stretcher in. And I had written everything down because I knew they were going to be taking him up to Raleigh, which was the main trauma center. And so I had written everything down, name, all his history, all his meds, allergies, all that stuff. And I couldn't get anyone to pay any attention to me. I'm trying to tell them, like, he's having a heart attack right now. And he also was recovering from a broken leg because 4 or 5 days previous to that, he was pushed through the garage door at work. It was winter and he was guiding a van in, and the guy, either, I hope accidentally, stepped on the gas instead of the brake, pushed him into a glass and metal garage door, and broke his leg. Because Mike had the presence of mind to jump up on the hood of the van. Otherwise, he really would have been crushed. So he's sitting in a recliner. He has a broken leg, and he's struggling to get up. And there were three big guys, and they were all lined up with their backs to me, and I couldn't get around them. And I finally said, "Can you please give him a hand? Like, pick up the back of his pants and get under his arm, and help him get up out of this," because he kept like trying and he couldn't get up. And they just stand there watching him. There's, three sets of hands here, and you're all just going to stand here and watch him struggle to get out of a chair. So when I yelled at them, they finally helped him up and got him on a stretcher, got him outside. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to take him to our little rinky dink local hospital, which is not equipped for a heart attack patient. And about a minute or so after they get him out and loaded, my phone rings. It's the paramedic who decided then to finally do a 12 lead EKG on him. And he said, he's infarcting right now, which MI, a myocardial infarction, heart attack. I said, yeah, I'm not surprised. I said, I was trying to tell you guys that all while you were in the house. And at one point, I walked up to the one guy and I whacked him on the arm, and he looked at me, and I took my piece of paper and I slapped it in his hand. I said, here, you might need this, because I couldn't go up to the hospital with him. I had to stay home. We didn't have a car, and I had to stay home to take care of our dogs. I said, I can't go, so you're going to need all this information. So then around 4 or 4:30 in the morning, a nurse from the cath lab calls me. Maybe they, no, I'm sorry. This was like midnight. That's right. It wasn't afternoon. This was midnight when he started having the burning pain in his chest. So at about 4:30 in the morning, I get a call from a nurse. And of course, I hadn't slept at all. I'm just sitting there. And she told me, about the two occlusions at either end of the coronary artery. He had been through the cath lab. He was fine. He was recovering. And so I was finally able to get some sleep. I get up the next morning and I call Wake Med in Raleigh, North Carolina, to try to see if I can talk to him or, get an update. They're trying to tell me he's not there. It took me 2.5 hours. And you can't make this stuff up. I can't. I don't have the imagination. If I did, I'd be like a best-selling novelist or something. Ultimately, well, after they hung up on me several times, and I would just call back because I'm like, I know he's there because that's where they told me they were taking him. A nurse from there called me and said, he came out of the cath lab. He was sleeping. He's still kind of groggy from anesthesia and whatever they give them. And ultimately, after 2.5 hours of them hanging up on me and me calling back, they put his name in the computer. They reversed it. They put his last name first, his first name last. Because I had asked, I said, can you put me through to, whatever cardiac unit people are put in after they have a cath, after they come out of the cath lab? No, we can't do that. Finally, I got so desperate, I said, can you send someone to that unit? I don't care if it's a janitor, and just ask if you have a Michael, his last name, in your unit. They kept telling me, no, we can't do that. I'm like, what? Is there some law now that like you're not allowed to transfer a phone call? And I can say, hey, I'm checking up on, so and so. My name is so and so. And apparently they couldn't do that. So after 2.5 hours, I finally gave up. And then my phone rings, and it was some administrator at the hospital who called me, and she's like, I understand you're looking for Michael. And I said, yes. I said, for 2.5 hours. And she said, well, they put his name in backwards. How do you even do that in a hospital? You know, even if someone had gone, or if they had put my call through and I had said, I'm looking for Michael, and they had it reversed, you'd think somebody would have been able to figure that out and find him for me, but no. So anyway, that was the second heart attack. That is the one that put him into heart failure. And that was, I'm not sure, it was somewhere in the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. I'm not exactly sure, but anyway, so that is the one that put him into heart failure. And then when we moved back home here and moved out where we are now in central PA, um, he had another heart attack. Now, we don't know exactly when he had it. He had a defibrillator. It was a defibrillator, cardioverter, pacer in his chest. He was upstairs one day in our upstairs bathroom, and he came downstairs and he told me he had gotten shocked once up in the bathroom. And I don't know why he didn't yell for me or what, but sometimes he just was like that. And as he was coming down the stairway, he got shocked again. So, of course, I asked him all the standard questions. Are you having chest pain? What were you doing? You know, he was just pulling his pants up. And um, typically, when you bear down, it can slow your heart down. That's a maneuver we use when people are in, it's a really fast rate called SVT, supraventricular tachycardia, but that's all irrelevant. Um, so, again, I call for EMS, and I don't really have any complaints there. I mean, they did get him right on the monitor, and he was in a normal rhythm. He hadn't had any chest pain, nothing, no nausea, dizziness, nothing. I mean, he just got shocked, and he was very taken aback. He didn't even know why he got shocked. And they got him over to the ER. The ER stuck him in this little itty bitty room and just like went about their business. I mean, they did have him on a monitor, and all of a sudden you hear the monitor beep 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 beep, and I look up and he's at 200 and rising. And I turned, and with that, I was turning to say, "Hey, you need to get over here." Well, that bunch of people came running, and they had to put him in a bigger room. And about 15 minutes after we arrived at the ER, his O2 sat dropped. I forget, dropped a lot. I don't remember exactly. And then he started having mid-scapular chest pressure in his back. And that doctor, the ER doctor, no, I'm sorry, um, different time. They admitted him, kept him a couple. They didn't have any. They don't have any facilities or a local hospital here uh, to do a cardiac cath. So they just admitted him for a few days, and like he got shocked twice at home here. 5 times he got shocked in the ER. A girl came in. The way they read these things, they have this like little round. There's so many different devices, but you have to have a specific reader to put over top the ICD. And the nurse came in, and she's pulling stuff out of the box, and she's like, pull something out. You know, you could just tell she had no idea what she was doing. She had no idea she was like she's the first time she's ever seen this stuff in a box. And I thought, oh, good grief. So after getting shocked 5 times in the ER, they took him up to the cardiac ICU, put him in the room, and he was eating a sandwich, literally. He was sitting in bed eating a sandwich, and all of a sudden I saw him throw the sandwich, and I hear the monitor beep, 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 beep. Thankfully, that time a doctor walked in who knew how to reset the ICD and put it at a higher threshold. Set, you know, I don't know what he set it at, but he set it up high enough that it wouldn't shock him. So that was almost 8 times he got shocked at the hospital, or altogether. So they kept him a few days, sent him home, and I don't know how much time went by. We were actually in another town at a friend's house, and all of a sudden he was not feeling right. So we called for EMS. EMS gets there, not the same EMS that covers out here where I live. This is a little in town volunteer They pull their stretcher out and they leave it all the way down at the bottom of the steps of our friend's house. And I said, you need to get that thing inside here. And they just all kind of shot me a look like, well, it's heavy. We don't want to have to carry it up. I don't care. I, I was not going to have him get up and walk down steps to get to the stretcher. And our friend she was up and moving furniture out of the way because her husband had issues. She knew what the deal was, you know, but EMS gets there and they're just like, first of all, they're putzing around, taking their good old time. So the first guy that came in, I start giving him all this history and I said, you better have a medic on board. He's like, oh yeah, they're on the way. So I'm following them to the hospital. I mean, I'm like a couple car lengths back, but we get to the exit, like the business exit for in town, or you keep going straight to get to the hospital. I see the medic unit veer off the exit. I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Like, if the medic's in the truck, where's your driver going? We get to the ER. There's no medic. They canceled him with a cardiac patient who already has a history of, two two heart attacks, getting shocked, and then I forget what what type of symptoms he was having that day. But you don't cancel the medics. What if Mike had a problem halfway to the hospital? You're going to look like idiots having to go, oh, call up your dispatcher and go, oh, you know what, the medics that we just canceled, yeah, we kind of need them. Can you send them back out here? So that time, they again took him and put him like in this off the way room. And I started saying something to the nurses and the nursing assistant they were getting him on a monitor and whatever else. And then again, they shoot me these dirty looks. They're like, we know what we're doing. I said, look, you need to put him in a bigger room. Like, you need to anticipate. I don't want this to sound wrong, but you need to connect the dots. And if need be, you need to anticipate something worse happening. In other words, you don't assume. You don't just go, well, he looks fine now, so we'll just put him in this off the way room here and, we'll put him on a monitor, but he's good. So I went and hunted down the doctor and I said, look, I said, I was a paramedic for, this many years. I said, before that, I was an EMT for this many years. Before that, I was a driver for a couple of years. I said, you need to listen to me. And I gave him his whole rundown. And that doctor, thankfully, had some respect for my experience and what I was telling him. And that doctor got him moved immediately to a bigger room. And the doctor went running away. I didn't know what he was doing. He comes back. He throws all this stuff on Mike's legs. He started the IV himself, which in all my years, I never saw a doctor starting an IV. It was always the nurses. And he got it right in. I was amazed. I mean, for someone that really didn't do it very often. And so anyway, that doctor had him transferred to a bigger hospital here. They did a cath the next morning and they found 2 more occlusions. So he had a heart attack somewhere in that timeline. We just don't know exactly. But thankfully, that doctor was listening and did the right things and transferred him instead of just admitting him and, we'll just admit him and watch him for a few days. We'll send him home. So, another time down in North Carolina, Mike and I were sitting out. It was summertime. We were having a yard sale. And we're sitting there and Mike got up and I don't recall what he said to me. I don't know if he said he was going in to use the bathroom or whatever. So he goes in the house and I'm sitting outside and about, 5 minutes or so passes. And I thought, well, he should be back out here by now. So I went in the house and he was laying on the couch and I said, what's going on? Because he just wouldn't tell me stuff. It was weird. He said, well, I got really dizzy. So I said, well, just stay there, stay on the couch. And I said, anything else? No, everything was fine. He just felt dizzy. And I thought, all right, well, it was a hot, sunny day. Maybe he was a little dehydrated or whatever. Before EMS got there, he told me he was starting to have that burning pain in his chest. So when EMS got there, again, they walk in with just themselves. This was after the ambulance passed our house, even though one of Mike's coworkers had stopped by and was standing out in the street waving to them, like, here. They went right past him. Then they turned around, came back, passed our friend again, and went up and parked like in front of our neighbor's house. Then they proceeded to make Mike walk to the ambulance. And I went in because I was sitting out in my bare feet. I had to get some shoes on. And then I knew I had to get all this yard sale stuff, piled up and put out of sight. I run in the house, I get my shoes, I come back out, and our friend, I looked over, and Mike is on his knees. And two medics, or a medic and an EMT, whatever, are literally trying to hike him up on his feet. And I heard the one guy say, "Come on, sir, you can do it." And I heard Mike like moaning or saying something like, I can't do this. And our friend looked at me, goes, "Yeah, that's the second time he's dropped to his knees." And I was ready to take him and run and get their stretcher when I looked up and I see a fourth person, who I guess sat in the truck the whole time, finally comes down with their litter. Is it a wonder this man never wanted me to call for medics? He never wanted me to call an ambulance. He was terrified of these people, and for good reason. And so, and I talked about his last day and how bad that was. But, I care about people. I always did. I always will. And I don't know exactly what's coming down the pike for this country. Things are not going in a good direction. And I've just noticed overall, like, even there's a trend online where, there's so many people who are like, the reason why I moved out in the middle of nowhere. And, they talk about that, they just want to live by themselves, completely isolated. They don't want anything to do with people. And so, yeah, let's all do that. Let's all just go find a little plot of land and let's all live completely isolated, because that's really good for society to be social. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I shouldn't care so much, but I can't turn it off. And it's still a lot of nights when I go to bed, the last thing I think about is that evening, his last night. And it bothers me. It bothers me a lot to know that's how he was treated. And that's how he spent his last probably 2 hours, in between here and then however much time at the hospital. And I'll tell you what, they did not work him long. I would say maybe a half an hour. And we were there years ago in that same ER when they brought an elderly man. And I'm not saying one person's more important than the other. I'm just making the distinction that used to be they would, and I did in the field. I mean, we would get these people in and we'd be working them and take them to the ER, and they would work them for like another hour until you absolutely, they're just not going to bring them back. But it really eats at me. And like I've said before, I wish to God I didn't even want to call the ambulance. I just had a bad feeling. But I thought, I'm not going to make this man get up and walk. And I had no way to get him out to my vehicle. I would have put him in my truck and taken him to the ER. I could have had him in there in like 2-3 minutes instead of these people dicking around in our living room. But, if you go into nursing, if you go into EMS, you want to become a doctor, radiology tech, anything, police officer, firefighter, directing traffic. I mean, anything where you are working with the public, people need to remember that you are dealing with other human beings. And do other people piss me off? Yeah. You should hear me when I'm driving around. I mean, ranting and raving like a lunatic when I'm driving, because people do. They annoy me. People pull out right in front of you. They cut you off or whatever. It doesn't mean I'm going to wipe all of humanity off the slate and go, well, that's it. I'm just going to go pitch a tent in the middle of the woods and I'm never going to talk to people again. I want us to regain our humanity. But particularly if you are in, quote, healthcare, you need to understand our healthcare system does not provide any health. It's a medical industrial system. That's what it is. It's it's just like you go through the door and they spit you out with a prescription or 10 or 20. But that's bad enough. But the fact that it just seems like even people in healthcare just don't care about anybody anymore. There's just there's no humanness. There's no empathy. There's no sympathy. There's no compassion. Everyone is a robotic. Everyone's reading off an algorithm or I don't know, but Mike went through the grinder. He really did. And it hurts immensely that his very last go around with the MS and the hospital were that bad. And I hope he's in a much better place. But I am imploring people who are in healthcare in any capacity. What we have to start being caring. We have to start caring about each other. I had to go get, I don't know, like an MRI or something. And when I'm laying flat and nothing to hold on to, I need someone to help me sit up. I can't just pop myself up. I had a technician. She took the sheet and like put it over her hand so she wouldn't have to touch me because we're all just a big bag of germs, right? You know, I don't know what else to say except I want this system to change. I want to see more natural care integrated in with allopathic. But mostly, I want to see people being the way my mother, who was a registered nurse, the way she was. She was accidentally holding a medical student's hand one time. She thought she had the patient's hand, and she didn't understand why this guy kept shooting her weird looks. So he finally leaned over and said, Gloria, you're holding my hand. And she went, oh, I thought I had the patient's hand. The room was dark. It was a special procedure. They put the lights out. That's the type of person she was. That was the type of person that I tried to be. But I see too much of people just don't care. Can we start caring? Can we rebuild this system into something that really matters and have people who give a damn? I hope so. All right. Well, thanks. And I'll see you next time I put something out. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.